Ever wondered why Texas is, well, Texas? It's more than just cowboys and oil, I promise. What if I told you the very ground beneath those iconic boots holds a secret history of epic battles, daring escapes, and legal wrangling that shaped not just a state, but a whole continent? Forget what you think you know about how states are born, because Texas's origin story is wilder than any fiction. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why everything's bigger in Texas, including its unbelievable journey to statehood. We're diving deep into the true origin story of the Lone Star State. You won't want to miss it. All right, settle in, because we're about to jump into a time machine. Close your eyes and picture this. It's the early 1800s. North America is a vast, untamed beast, still figuring out what it wants to be. The United States, a freshly minted experiment in democracy, is eyeing lands to the west. Lands controlled by a fading colonial giant, Spain. And smack dab in the middle of it all, a sprawling, resource-rich territory known as Tejas. But here's the kicker. It was practically empty. Think vast plains, shimmering deserts, and a few scattered missions. Sounds ripe for the taking, right? Well, not so fast. This wasn't just empty land. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. And that spark? It wasn't gold or even oil initially. It was something far more fundamental. The promise of a new life. Now, Spain, bless its heart, was stretched thin. Managing an empire spanning continents? Tough gig. So, what did they do? They opened the doors to American settlers. Yeah, you heard that right. The very people who would eventually fight them for the land were invited in. Why? Because they needed people to develop the land, to act as a buffer against hostile Native American tribes. It seemed like a win-win, right? Spain gets settlers, Americans get cheap land. But here's where the first aha moment hits. These American settlers weren't just looking for land. They brought something else with them. A completely different way of life, a different language, and most crucially, a different legal system. And that, my friends, was the ticking time bomb. Imagine being an American, used to common law, jury trials, and individual freedoms, suddenly living under Spanish civil law, where the government held much more sway. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And the rules? Oh, there were rules. You had to become Catholic, speak Spanish, and eventually become a Mexican citizen after Mexico gained independence from Spain in 1821. But did everyone follow those rules? Wink. Let's just say human nature, especially the adventurous, freedom-loving kind, tends to find loopholes. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about identity. It was about cultural collision. And it was inevitable that something had to give. Now fast forward a bit. Mexico wins its independence from Spain in 1821. Boom! New country, new rules. Tejas is now part of Mexico. But the problem of the empty northern territory, filled with these increasingly independent-minded American immigrants, only intensified. Mexico, in its youthful optimism, kept the doors open for a while, offering even more generous land grants. This attracted a wave of what became known as empresarios, essentially land agents who brought in hundreds, sometimes thousands, of families. The most famous of these? Stephen F. Austin. He's often called the father of Texas, and for good reason. He really believed in making this work, balancing Mexican law with American ambition. But here's the next dopamine hit. Imagine trying to govern a population that's growing exponentially. It doesn't speak your language, doesn't share your customs, and frankly, isn't super keen on following your laws, especially when it comes to things like slavery, which Mexico had outlawed, but many American settlers still relied on. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. It wasn't just a political disagreement, it was a clash of civilizations, a battle of wills, and a fight for the very soul of a burgeoning territory. What do you think happens when two irresistible forces meet? Something's got to give, and it usually involves fireworks. So, how did this cultural melting pot boil over into full-blown revolution? And what seemingly small decisions set these massive events in motion? Keep watching to find out. And hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive into history and science, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us bring more awesome, factual, and entertaining content to you every week. Our goal is to make complex history simple and engaging for everyone, and your support makes that possible. Thanks a million. All right, so we've got Mexico trying to integrate these new American settlers into their system, and the settlers, well, they're doing their own thing. It's like a parent telling their teenager to clean their room, and the teenager just redecorates it in a totally different style. The first major point of friction, and honestly, one of the biggest aha moments that really drove things, was the Fredonian Rebellion of 1826. Now, this wasn't a huge, earth-shattering war, but it was a massive red flag for Mexico. Imagine Hayden Edwards, an impresario, declaring his colony independent and renaming it Fredonia. Mexico was like, hold up, what? This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a direct challenge to their sovereignty. It showed Mexico that these settlers weren't just temporary guests. Some of them had their own agenda. The rebellion was quickly squashed, but the seed of distrust was firmly planted. Mexico started to get nervous, and rightly so. This nervousness led to the Mier y Terán expedition in 1828. Mexico sent General Manuel de Mier y Terán to assess the situation in Texas. What did he find? He found that Americans outnumbered Mexicans by about 10-1 in many areas. And here's the kicker. He found that the American influence was so strong, so pervasive, that it felt like he was in a foreign country, not a part of Mexico. He saw English being spoken everywhere, American customs, and a general disregard for Mexican laws. His report back to Mexico City was basically a giant blinking danger sign. This wasn't just a demographic shift, it was an ideological takeover in progress. And what do governments do when they feel threatened? They legislate. So, in response to Mier y Terán's dire warnings, Mexico passed the law of April 6, 1830. This was a game changer. Imagine a stern parent finally putting their foot down. This law basically said, no more American immigration into Texas, no more bringing slaves into Texas, and it canceled all unfulfilled impresario contracts. It also increased tariffs on goods from the U.S. and sent more Mexican troops to enforce these new rules. This was Mexico's attempt to regain control, to staunch the flow of American influence. But here's the ironic twist. Instead of solving the problem, it ignited the revolution. Why? Because it hit the settlers where it hurt. Their ability to expand, to bring in family, and to maintain their economic system based on enslaved labor. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was perceived as an attack on their way of life. And when you corner people, especially those who value their independence, they tend to fight back. Now things really start to heat up. We're talking skirmishes, protests, and a growing sense of defiance. Think of the Anahuac disturbances in 1832 and 1835. These were clashes between Texas settlers and Mexican authorities, often over customs duties and the enforcement of Mexican laws. These weren't full-blown battles, but they were like loud arguments that escalated into shoving matches. Each incident chipped away at any remaining goodwill. The settlers felt oppressed, and the Mexican government felt disrespected. It was a classic lose-lose situation, building tension like a coiled spring. And speaking of coiled springs, let's talk about Santa Anna. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was a complex figure, a general who became president of Mexico multiple times. Initially, many Texans, including Stephen F. Austin, actually supported him when he promised to uphold the liberal Mexican Constitution of 1824, which offered states more autonomy. But here's the twist. Santa Anna was a chameleon. Once in power, he switched gears and became a centralist. essentially dissolving the 1824 Constitution and concentrating power in the national government. This was another huge aha moment for the Texans. They had supported him, thinking he was their champion, only to find he was tightening the screws even further. It felt like a betrayal. This move, more than almost anything else, convinced many Texans that peaceful coexistence with Mexico was no longer possible. Their desire for self-governance wasn't just about land anymore. It was about political freedom. The final straw, the spark that truly lit the fuse, came in the form of a small cannon. Yes, a cannon. The Battle of Gonzales in October 1835. Mexican authorities demanded the return of a small cannon they had loaned to the town of Gonzales for defense against Native American attacks. The Texans, famously, refused, flying a flag that read, "Come and take it." This wasn't just about a cannon. It was a symbolic act of defiance, a clear message that they would no longer submit. This was the first military engagement of the Texas Revolution. From a scientific perspective, you could almost describe this as a critical mass being reached. All the preceding political, social, and economic pressures had finally built up to an irreversible point, leading to an explosive chain reaction. The point of no return had been crossed. The battle lines were drawn. And what happened next would etch itself into the annals of history forever. How did a ragtag group of settlers stand up against an established nation? And what iconic but ultimately tragic event became the ultimate rallying cry for Texas independence? You'll find out right after this. So, the cannon at Gonzales roared and the revolution was officially on. The Texans, now fully committed, declared their independence on March 2, 1836, forming the Republic of Texas. But declaring independence and being independent are two very different things, aren't they? Mexico, under Santa Anna, wasn't just going to wave goodbye. He was furious and determined to crush the rebellion. And this brings us to one of the most famous and tragic events in Texas history: the Battle of the Alamo. Picture this: February 23 to March 6, 1836. A small group of Texan defenders, fewer than 200 men, holed up in an old Spanish mission in San Antonio, led by legendary figures like William B. Travis, Jim Bowie, and Davy Crockett. Against them, thousands of Santa Anna's well-trained Mexican soldiers. It was a desperate stand, a siege that lasted 13 days. From a psychological standpoint, it was a brutal test of endurance and courage. The Texans knew they were likely doomed, but they chose to fight to the last man. The Alamo fell, and virtually all the defenders were killed. This was a devastating military defeat for the Texans. But here's the ultimate aha moment: the paradox of sacrifice. The Alamo didn't break the Texan spirit, it forged it. It became a powerful symbol of resistance, a rallying cry. Remember the Alamo. It transformed a military loss into an emotional victory, unifying the scattered Texan forces and galvanizing their resolve. But the bloodshed wasn't over. Just weeks after the Alamo, another massacre occurred at Goliad. Colonel James Fannin and his Texan forces surrendered to Mexican troops, believing they would be treated as prisoners of war. Instead, under Santa Anna's orders, nearly 350 Texans were executed. This act, far from intimidating the Texans, further fueled their rage and determination. The Mexican army's brutality ironically created an unshakable resolve in the Texan forces. Now, this is where a truly remarkable figure steps in: Sam Houston. He was chosen as the commander of the Texan army. Houston understood guerrilla warfare and strategic retreat. He knew he couldn't face Santa Anna's larger, professional army head-on, so he retreated, drawing Santa Anna deeper into Texas, stretching his supply lines. Many criticized him for this, but Houston had a plan. He was like a chess master, sacrificing pawns to set up the ultimate checkmate. And that checkmate came at the Battle of San Jacinto on April 21, 1836. This was the climax, the ultimate payoff. After weeks of retreating and maneuvering, Houston's army, now numbering around 900 men, surprised Santa Anna's forces during their afternoon siesta near what is now Houston. The battle was a whirlwind, lasting only about 18 minutes. The Texans, screaming "Remember the Alamo, remember Goliad," launched a ferocious attack. Santa Anna's army was completely routed, hundreds were killed, and most importantly, Santa Anna himself was captured the next day, hiding in disguise. Imagine that moment. The commander-in-chief of Mexico, captured by the very rebels he vowed to crush. This was the ultimate victory, the definitive proof that Texas could be independent. Santa Anna, to secure his freedom, signed the treaties of Velasco, recognizing Texas independence and setting the Rio Grande as the boundary. While Mexico later disputed these treaties, claiming Santa Anna signed them under duress, the practical effect was that Texas was free. So, what's the big lesson here? The origin story of Texas isn't just about dates and battles. It's a powerful testament to the force of cultural identity, the consequences of political miscalculation, and the incredible resilience of a people determined to shape their own destiny. It shows how legal frameworks, scientific observations like Mier y Terran's report, and individual acts of defiance can intertwine to create monumental historical shifts. Texas wasn't just given its independence. It fought tooth and nail for it, paying a heavy price in blood and sacrifice. And that, my friends, is why the Lone Star State holds such a unique and fiercely independent place in the American story. It's a powerful reminder that freedom often comes at a cost, but the human spirit's drive for self-determination can overcome even the most daunting odds. What an incredible journey, right? And there you have it, the epic, action-packed origin story of the great state of Texas. What did you find most surprising? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more historical deep dives. Until next time, stay curious.